Hey everybody, welcome back to Local 4 Live. I'm Nick Monticelli. Thank you so much for watching. Right now, school districts in Michigan are trying to budget for the next school year, plan for this coming school year. But the problem, they have no idea how much money they're going to be getting from the state. That's because the Michigan House and Senate could not come to a compromise on an overall state budget last week, blowing through a self-imposed deadline. So here's what the chambers are at odds over. The Democratic-led Senate wants to basically keep the traditional funding for K through 12 schools. The Republican-led House wants to make changes, adding money for private schools and including penalties for schools that fund DEI or allow transgender athletes in sports. School districts set their budgets by July 1st, but it may not be until October 1st when the state has to pass their budget, when districts will finally learn how much money they will be getting. To talk about the impact from this, we are joined by Robert Monroe. He is the superintendent for Utica Community Schools. And we have Monica Merritt, who is the superintendent for the Plymouth Canton School District. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I have to ask, is this frustrating? Is it something you're used to? How do you plan for a school year not knowing what kind of money you're dealing with? Robert, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Appreciate your time this morning. I think you hit it right on the head. A lot of uncertainty around this budget and when and if the budget will get done during the summer or even going into the fall. You know, we're required to pass a budget for our school district by June 30th. And being that we're dependent upon 75% of our funding from the state of Michigan, this creates a lot of uncertainty. Being one of the largest employers in the state of Michigan, in Macomb County, it really makes it challenging to our constituents, our parents, our employees, to have this uncertainty looming around it. So we're really hopeful that sooner than later, a budget will get done.
So, Monica, a similar question to you then, especially your district isn't necessarily one of them, but there are a lot of teachers right now who don't even know if they're going to have jobs. I'm sure there are districts all over the place that are facing even larger issues.
Absolutely. So when you think about, as Mr. Monroe talked about, this lack of clarity and the impact here at schools, definitely through a teacher shortage, when we're having to budget conservatively because we don't know what the budget will look like in the fall. We've had to lay off staff, and at times those potential employees may look elsewhere. So you could start the school year off without students in classrooms to fill those. So not only are we looking at issues of staffing, but we're also looking at things that impact the day-to-day environment for students, our meal preparation, preparing for bus routes. When we look at our students with additional needs, such as special education services and Title I supports, we need to make sure that we have the funding to really support what every student needs to be successful. Right. And without this certainty right now, we're really having to budget very conservatively going into the fall, which puts us in a difficult position.
Which, speaking of, and Robert, this question will be for you, is that, you know, some of the state lawmakers have countered saying, well, they kind of know what the budgets are going to be. They can start working from there. I don't know about you, but I don't like kind of knowing what my budget is when I'm working on my checkbook.
No, I think you're right. It's like operating your own household, right? You really would like to know what's coming in so that you can plan for tomorrow. And I think that's exactly right, Nick. When we look at our budget planning, that we're required to fulfill by the end of June, we really are looking at our best estimates coming out of the state of Michigan. So this year in particular, I think greater than any other year I've seen in quite a while, there's been vast proposals, one way or the other, as far as what we would be looking at as far as what a potential budget would be. So what we forecasted back in June is very much different what we're talking about today. And I would also add, as Dr. Merritt was talking about, moving into the fall. If things don't, if we don't get better clarity going into the fall, it's very hard to address certain issues that the school district needs or has moving into the fall. Because once we've established and started the school year, it's very, very difficult to add or look at resources to help support students. Or, for example, my community is very passionate about class sizes. We can't make adjustments on class sizes going into the fall once the school year has started.
Sure.
So I think those are very important issues for us.
So then what happens, and either of you can answer this, what happens if you are projecting a budget and then you don't get as much as you thought from the state and now you have a deficit after the school year has already started?
Yeah, to Superintendent Monroe's point, once you have staffing established, you can't start a classroom and then eliminate a teacher once class is started. And so you are forced to look at your fund balance at times. And when you're projecting what that budget should be, then you may have to make some adjustments on the side. Sometimes you may be forced to do last minute reductions in staffing, which is always going to be detrimental to students, which would result in increased class sizes as well. So as Superintendent Monroe shared, when we're budgeting conservatively in the beginning, we're used to getting these different forecasts, but they usually have something that aligns across the three in terms of the executive proposal, the House and the Senate proposal. But these last minute changes really have left us in a difficult position in terms of what that looks like for the fall. So most of us have had to make the decision to really budget very conservatively, have larger class sizes than we would anticipate, have less supports. And you have to remember also we're dealing with where we had a surge of federal funds for the last few years.
Right,
and
right.
now we still have those same needs. Students that are struggling with mental health challenges, we need to have the supports in place to help those students with those needs.
Right.
But we don't have that funding aligned. So
Yeah.
we've had to make difficult decisions early.
So you both have used the word conservative many times here, talking about what your budgets are going to look like. How then are you able to say, or I'll ask this, what is it like then when you have to budget conservatively, but you want to add on the additional support staff? You want to have more extracurriculars. You want to do the things that make community so much better, but you don't know if you're going to have the money, and then maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't.
I'll take that one first, Nick. I think just as you said, conservatively, in many cases, we have to do without going into the next school year. Or we get very creative around the supports and the needs that the school district has. In many cases, we are looking to add services throughout the summer. But as I stated before, we move into the fall. That is very, very difficult. Dr. Merritt is correct when we talk about dipping into the fund equities that maybe we have in our school districts, planning for that school year, and then looking at how we can best supplement during the course of the school year. But then if we don't see those dollars come in, the stable funding coming in, then we're looking at possibly even making reductions during the course of the end of the year or going into the following school year.
Dr. Merritt, do you want to add anything?
I was going to share, we've already done some work to really prioritize those needs. So in addition to what's happening in Lansing with the delay of the budget, we also have some uncertainty that's coming around from some federal funds out of Washington, D.C. So we're already beginning to have those kind of if then what conversations to say. If we don't get the anticipated funding that we need, then what do we need to shift in the fall to still provide our students with the supports that they need with the uncertainty of the cost, and recognize that about 85% of our budget is for staff. And so when you think about those additional programs and supports that our students deserve, that our community expects, we really have to play that game to try to figure out what we're able to fund and what is the most important priority, which is always
right. And then you become the bad guy when you have to cut something only because of a budget shortfall you didn't know of. I do want to ask you one kind of a delicate question to both of you. I don't want to open the can of worms on politics, on DEI and transgender athletes and some of those things. I'm not going to ask you right or wrong, but I am curious your thoughts on caveats coming out of Lansing that say you might get this money or you might not, depending on if you do X or Y. Again, not asking the right or wrong portion of it, but what are your thoughts on caveats being tied to money?
Well, Nick, if I could, I think I was going to shift before you asked that question to just talk about stability of our funding. And I have to tell you, when we talk about, I believe there's a lot of discussion, a lot of chatter going on in Lansing around what this K-12 budget will look like. And I think when we talk about the stability of funding, I think we really have to look at not just this year, but long range. Certainly, we want to get a budget done now. But when we talk about the stability of funding, we always look back to our foundation allowance as being the area in which we want to see our funding go to. And then certainly we don't want to look at taking away from our kids that need certain supports, need additional help. For example, in Utica Community Schools, we have almost 80 languages that we see across our vast community. We also see that we have needs for our special needs students that have vastly increased, and that we need to look at how we provide them supports on a daily basis. So there are unique needs there. But at the end of the day, the stability of the funding really needs to parallel what we're doing with schools. When we get to the budget time in June or even prior, it would be wonderful knowing that we have this stable funding mechanism coming in each year. You know, I know Lansing has heard from our K-12 organizations. They've heard from us as superintendents that we don't want to do one-time funding. We don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, take money out of the retirement fund, take money from higher ed and push it in, you know, out of the K-12 budget. We would like to see a stable source moving forward. So as we're having this interview today, this conversation, we're not having these conversations in the future.
Right.
We're talking more about what we're doing for kids and the great things that we're doing for kids on a daily basis. And I can speak for Utica Schools. We're doing some wonderful things for kids. Having a stable mechanism from Lansing would vastly improve our ability to get things done on a daily basis.
Right. We are essentially out of time here, but Monica, I do have to give you the opportunity to talk about stability or caveats on funding.
Yes. I would definitely just add that we all know that there are different priorities across the state. But what I would say is that our taxpayers expect that every single dollar that is meant for the classroom will end up in the classroom. And our role as superintendents is to ensure that funding is spent as efficiently as possible in support of our students for their success. And that can only be done when our legislators get their job done and allocating those funds to us here at the schools. And I will say that we all can agree in terms of those caveats that more things such as roads need the investment. That really just can't come off of the school aid fund, though. We need to ensure that educators and parents alike can really get that support from Lansing to divert that money to the classroom and not outside of the classroom in support of our students.
All right, Monica Merritt, Superintendent for Plymouth Canton, and Robert Monroe, Superintendent for UCS, Utica Community Schools. Thank you so much for joining us. I know this is an important conversation, a frustrating one, because I can tell by both of you today it must be a terribly difficult and challenging job trying to take care of all of our kids, not know what money you have to do it. So thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.